Reg, is this the quintessential trap game for the Dallas Cowboys as they take on the Jaguars and then, of course, welcome in Jalen Hurts, MVP candidate, and the Philadelphia Eagles on Christmas Eve? Is this the quintessential trap game for the Cowboys this weekend?
I'm inclined to say no. But I guess when you I then question, like, what do you mean by quintessential trap game? Because the Jacksonville Jaguars do offer like a challenge of sorts, but like the idea that this is the quintessential trap game, I need a little bit more explanation on that. Can you illuminate that a little bit more for me?
Well, when you look at trap games, a team that possibly is looking ahead to a bigger matchup in the next week,
okay,
a division rival, a team that you're trying to catch in front of you, not just for NFC East supremacy, but also for the NFC #1 seed as well, because that is still, yes, an outside shot, but still in play for the Dallas Cowboys. And some of the trash talk that we've heard, quote unquote, from Micah Parsons, who has walked some of that back today with respect to him respecting Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. All of those things give you the idea that the Cowboys, or a team in this particular scenario, might be overlooking an opponent that theoretically you would take lightly, but when you start doing a little bit deeper dive into that particular opponent for that week, they're a team that could possibly give you some problems. And Jacksonville, to me, is that potential team. Trevor Lawrence has been really good as of late. They've got a good running game with Travis Etienne. They got some good skill players there and enough competence to possibly give you some trouble on the road, where you are just a 4.5-point favorite on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So for me, that's how I would define a trap game. Are you looking ahead to a bigger quote-unquote opponent and overlooking the one that could actually give you some problems and maybe even catch you with an L if you don't handle your business correctly?
I hear you there. And look, I understand where you're trying to go with this. So you know what? I'm not going to be difficult like I can be from time to time. I'm going to agree with you. I do think this has the potential to be a trap game for the Dallas Cowboys. You mentioned part of this, right? Like, this is a team that has Trevor Lawrence that I think we've all established is a good quarterback at the least, right? I think this season has given us enough of a sample and enough data that we can get to the point where we say that he is, in fact, a good quarterback. And a good quarterback on any given Sunday is going to be an issue for you. On top of that, the Jacksonville Jaguars are not a bad rushing team. I don't know if I'm willing to say that they are a good team running the football, but I think they are capable of running the football. And when I say that, like, that is something that the Cowboys had an issue with. Now, it does seem like over the last 3-4 weeks that they have tightened that up. But I do know that there are going to be teams that are consistently going to look at them and say, well, let's go ahead and test how strong that is. And that's going to be a possibility. Plus, again, going back to the idea that they have a quarterback that can throw the football, they have serviceable weapons, and maybe even better than serviceable, maybe overpaid. But when it comes down to getting between those lines on an actual Sunday, ain't nobody worried about what that contract says for Christian Kirk or what have you. Those guys out there can be difficult for you to deal with. And with that being the case, you also got to consider the fact that you are dealing with, second string cornerbacks out there. You're not the only team out there. This is the NFL. This happens with a lot of teams out there, but you are dealing with that, and teams are going to want to attack that. And I'm sure this is a point that you absolutely love and want to make. That is a well-coached football team. And that is something that is always going to be a worry when you get into a situation that is pseudo-trap game-like.
And for a coach in Doug Peterson, who knows this Cowboys team very, very well from the amount of time that he spent in the NFC East coaching the team that the Cowboys will see on Christmas Eve in the Philadelphia Eagles, Trevor Lawrence last week became the youngest player in NFL history with at least 350 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes and 1 rushing touchdown in their beatdown of the Tennessee Titans, who at this point look for every reason to be put out of their misery the way that they are going in the wrong direction right now in the AFC South. But when you look at what the Cowboys have done over the last 3 weeks, yes, they have hung 33 points on the Indianapolis Colts in the fourth quarter. Yes, they used a 98-yard drive, in the final minutes of Sunday's game against the Texans to get the win ultimately. They played much better in the second half against the New York Giants after allowing them to stay in it during that particular football game. This is not a team that you want to necessarily play with your food with if you're the Dallas Cowboys, given some of the firepower that the Jacksonville Jaguars present, particularly offensively. And if you let this team hang around, they've shown enough to where, again, you mentioned the competence in what they have with Doug Peterson there, that they're going to be a team that's going to hang with you. So if you're the Cowboys on Sunday, you cannot be thinking about anything else than what the task is in front of you. And I think some of what we've seen this week, in terms of the quote-unquote distraction, if you will, which is a hallmark of this organization anyway, but the Cowboys talking about opponents that are not playing this week. They're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, talking about Jalen Hurts. You got to have your focus squarely on Jacksonville. Otherwise, they're going to catch you. And they're at home this week as well, being able to have the opportunity to build some confidence against the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think sometimes the idea of like teams talking about teams ahead of them can be really easy narratives for us to craft, and I don't know necessarily how strong those things actually are when we get down to the nitty-gritty. I already were 8 minutes into the show, and let me go ahead and reel something back in. I talked about how the Jaguars aren't bad at running the football, and that was based off of their yards per attempt on the season and putting them like at 12th in the league, which, kind of, middling. Oh, when it comes to efficiency, they are bad at running the football, especially over the last 4 weeks or so. Like efficiency-wise, they are second to last, especially when we talk about success rate, which is getting the amount of yards to be considered a successful run in any particular situation. Their success rate is second to last right now over the last 4 weeks. They currently exist at a 27.4% success rate running the football, which is second only to the New Orleans Saints running the football, if that gives you any impression. Yeah, so this actually isn't a very good, efficient running football team. So, hey, that's something that you do not have to worry about anymore. Got rid of that for you.
And this is an offensive line for the Jacksonville Jaguars that you can get after a little bit. We mentioned it yesterday in terms of how poor the Cowboys are when it comes to pass block win rate in the NFL, which is the ability to sustain a block for 2.5 seconds. The Jacksonville Jaguars are third worst in the NFL when it comes to pass block win rate. It's the Colts, the Cowboys, and the Jaguars. So theoretically, when you hear a number like that, you may think that the Cowboys' pass rushing ability will be able to have some effect on Trevor Lawrence in this offensive line with DeMarcus Lawrence, who's been dealing with a foot injury, obviously Micah Parsons, Dorrance Armstrong, who's dealing with an ankle injury right now. But this defensive line, may have the opportunity to be able to get after Trevor Lawrence. And we've seen how good this pass rush has been, a top 5 team in the NFL in sacking the quarterback, being able to get pressure on said quarterback as well. This could be a huge area of success for the Cowboys on Sunday, getting after what is a questionable offensive line for Jacksonville.
Absolutely. Now, the tough thing about it is, will that turn into sacks? Because when it comes down to it, the offensive line isn't really the indicator of what will end up being sacks. That is largely placed on the quarterback. And Trevor Lawrence has shown a propensity for being able to move in the pocket or just downright run if he needs to. But will that pressure affect him? Now, I was trying to find comprehensive, when it actual pressure stats for quarterbacks, and I didn't do a good job of it. I
got one for you.
Oh, you got him?
I got one for you.
Go ahead and throw this over to you. What you got for me?
Well, particularly when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys specifically, the Dallas pass rush this year leads the NFL with 200 pressures, according to Pro Football Focus.
Okay.
While ranking second with 48 sacks. So you're talking about the kind of pressure rate that is effective. The Cowboys certainly are that. We know that Micah Parsons is one of the best in the NFL, particularly when it comes to to pressure rate in the NFL. So you've got guys that can go and affect the pocket and the quarterback. And if you can hurry Trevor Lawrence a little bit into making him make some ill-advised throws, now you're bringing the secondary into play, specifically Trayvon Diggs and what he could possibly do. Because I do think Trevor Lawrence, as much as other teams will the rest of the year, will test the other side of this Cowboys secondary, particularly Kelvin Joseph, much like in ways that the Texans tried to do a little bit on Sunday. Trevor Lawrence is much more capable of being able to do that with some of the skilled players when you're talking about guys like Christian Kirk and others that are on this offense for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, the tough thing about it is this defensive line, and this is more off of a feeling or perception off of watching the game. I haven't gone and actually looked at the numbers on this, so I'm liable to be wrong. There's a possibility of being wrong here. But it does seem like this Cowboys team has had some issues containing at times when they get up there and they're doggedly trying to pressure the quarterback. Sometimes they find themselves in a situation where that quarterback can leak out, and that can be problematic against this dude. This season, he is averaging 8.8 yards per scramble attempt. So, if you get him, if you get in a situation where it's hey, we've pressured him, if you don't complete it, or if he decides that he wants to pull the ball down and actually find space, then you're in a situation where that's going to be tough. You're putting pressure on the likes of Leighton Vander Esch, Anthony Barr, if he's the one line. Damone Clark, who has actually done a really good job ranging. I've been very proud of both him and Leighton Vander Esch's efforts, but you give them the tough duty of having to then go corral him when he gets free. And as we've established, that dude can run a little bit.
When you look at this Jacksonville Jaguar team, you got guys like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones Jr., former Detroit Lion, Evan Ingram, former New York Football Giant,
who caught a touchdown pass this past week.
He started to find a little bit of a home there in Jacksonville. So, some of the names that you hear with them, we all laughed, at the beginning of the season, or during the offseason, I should say, when Christian Kirk got, on average $21 million per year, from the Jacksonville Jaguars. But you give Doug Peterson and this team a lot of credit for the competitiveness that they are showing, that I think gives people an idea that going into next year, this is going to be a team that you need to watch out for. But this Cowboys team, I think the last 3 weeks, if Houston wasn't a wake-up call on Sunday based on the way that they played, they've got another thing coming, because Jacksonville, much better team with much more competence on the offensive side of the ball, that if you don't come with your A game, you're going to find yourself falling behind. But they have enough, the Cowboys obviously do, to be able to do what they believe they're capable of, especially in getting after the passer there. But they better realize that this past Sunday had to be the wake-up call, because I thought it was the Green Bay game when you were up by 14 points and you allowed Aaron Rodgers and that team to come back on you, to be like, okay, we can't get out here and play with our food in this way. The Houston game definitely had to be that. Otherwise, we may be talking about an L coming for the Cowboys on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. We get tied up into the emotions of it, but remember, what lost you that game was turnovers.
Almost lost it again. You're talking about
well, yes, again.
Yes. It felt like a loss.
Again, going back to the way that we feel. We have been caught up in the feelings to the point where I keep saying loss as if they did not win that football game. No, but what it felt like made that game really difficult, well, what definitely made that game really difficult was the turnovers. And that is not something that that's not something that is necessarily a trend for this team. Although they have had turnovers, losing the turnover battle in that way is not something that I can forecast in happening again. And with that being the case, this is objectively a better team than Jacksonville Jaguars. Not to say that they should look ahead or that they shouldn't underrate this team. But you look at the offense as we just had. If you look at this defense for the Jaguars, they are not great against the pass. At least when we talk about efficiency-wise. This is a team that can pass the football on the Cowboys, right? These are things that are tough for them. So I think that you should be fine in this situation. Of course, I've said that before and looked a little funny, but I do not anticipate having such a tough time with a muffed punt and with a couple of interceptions in the way that they happen.
You just can't beat yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
That feels like that's kind of the place that the Cowboys have been in. Once you are established as at least a baseline good team, which if somebody wants to fight me on that, my goodness, I don't know what we're doing. They're a baseline good team. How good they are is the question for certain folks. So I think that that's a fair one. But once you establish yourself at that point, the objective is just not shooting yourself in the foot. And we will see that again on display on Sunday.